Hi, and welcome back to the Writer's Parachute. We're so glad that you're able to join us today, and we have an amazing guest. We have Carol Boyce, who is joining us. She is a new author. Her book is coming out this spring and early summer. It is called First, I Believe You. It's a really good book. It has a deep dive into some particularly prickly topics, but we will talk about that in a moment. And of course, always at the beginning, we have the little bit of housekeeping that we always have to do. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Writer's Parachute on the YouTube channel. Also to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Writer Parachute with no S. And of course, just getting us started, we're going to talk again, still here in April, about book festivals and book awards. It is that time of year where we are looking at book festivals and awards to enter our books for as writers and authors. So I'm going to bring you another one today. So we have upcoming this spring. It's coming up pretty quickly, but they are still taking applications. And that is the San Francisco Book Fest that is in spring. We believe it is in May or June. They don't have a specific date. If somebody can nail down that date for me and let me know, I would appreciate that. Just add that to the comments. And then, of course, we want to talk about an award. It is the award season. So one of the easier awards to enter is called a Reader's Favorite Award. If you go to readersfavorite.com, you can list, they have all of the explanation and listing for entering your books for Reader's Favorite. I do believe they also do reviews of the books. So that's always an extra bonus for you. So again, we want to remind you, it is that time of year where the book festivals and the award season is now open and in full swing. So please do take advantage of these opportunities to market and promote your books. So if you have any awards or festivals that you have participated in or are thinking of participating in and would like me to recommend those to my audience, please do leave that information in the comments and I will add that to my list of awards and festivals for this time of year. So let's go ahead and move on. And of course, today we have with us an amazing guest. She's a personal friend of mine, and I appreciate her coming here today. Her name is Carol Boyce, and she has a new book coming out this spring called First, I Believe You. Carol is an accomplished author, opera singer, investor, teacher, community volunteer, and chemist with a degree in biology and chemistry and an MBA in finance. Her love of travel and anthropology has taken her to all corners of the world. She loves to kayak, bike, and attend the theater. Carol's greatest joy is spending time with her husband of 45 years, her 2 grandchildren, and 2 children. She lives in Fair Oaks outside of Sacramento, California with her family. Welcome to the Writer's Parachute, Carol. How are you today?
I'm great, Donna. It's so great to see you. And I so appreciate you doing your podcast. You are a tremendous asset to writers all over the world, and you've helped me greatly.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate that. And I'm so excited to talk to you about this book. You and I have kind of worked off and on this book for, what has it been, like a year or two now?
It's been going on 2 years. Yes.
Wow. You know, and I mean, that just goes to show you, you know, a lot of times they don't come fast. A lot of times, a lot of hard days and weeks and work involved in getting a book out. So this first book that you have, First, I Believe You, which I love that title, is scheduled to release this June. So what inspired you to write this very personal and poignant story now?
I had gone through a very, very difficult journey of recovery from my childhood. I had had so many symptoms. I had no idea what they represented. And I had begun to start writing through the group Shut Up and Write, which you lead. I started to write down just tidbits I remembered, little stories. And with I finally decided that this was the time to put it together when I retired and leave a legacy of my story, at least, that maybe it will help others.
Well, that's always a good thought. And that is what I try to teach, is right toward your audience, is like leave them something interesting to read. And in this book, it really reveals some very deep and personal incidents throughout your life. So what is the message that you're trying to get your readers to get from your story?
Well, I think there are several messages. I think for all these people out there that are suffering with anxiety and fears and eating disorders, addictions, and just general trauma, something has happened to them. Something is beneath this, and they need to keep searching till they find it. They've got to get into trauma recovery if that's appropriate for them. And I think it's just bringing to the conversation and moving the needle a little bit forward on how sexual abuse might show up, how childhood trauma may come out. There's very little understanding about trauma and trauma recovery. It's a new field. And what happened to you, like Oprah says in her book, is what the critical question is.
Right. And it is becoming more and more prevalent. I do appreciate the fact that it is not the stigma that it used to be. Mental health is not the stigma that it used to be. And so we do have more people seeking help and treatment and understanding of the things that they've gone through. And I think nobody gets to adulthood without some obstacle or problem in their life that they have to overcome. But some are much more harder to get past or to deal with than others. And I do appreciate you sharing that story with us. You talk about trauma and amnesia or memory loss, and it's often glossed over or just kind of omitted, especially the side effects, by most other authors. Yet you don't shy away from that at all in your book, and you tell the horrible truth about what happened to you. So I want to know, why is sharing that uncomfortable moment or moments in your life so important to telling your story?
I have to step back and really look at my whole journey. I had no idea what was wrong with me. There were no books on this. There were no therapists that were accessible to me to recover, and no one could diagnose what was going on with me. And I was having panic attacks and strange fears and constant, what I now know is PTSD. But I just thought I was going crazy. And so I think it's very important to go step by step through what I was feeling, what I was thinking, what other people were saying to me, and really document my journey through this. I have not seen this written before. Yeah, so that's why I felt it so important.
Right. And I have talked to many people who've had sexual abuse. That's mostly what we're talking about in their childhood. But I've never seen it documented in this way. And I've never seen it being so raw and so presented in a way that it's cathartic, it's healing, it connects you to so many traumas, because it's not just one trauma that you're talking about. There are multiple traumas throughout your story. But I love the fact that you are straddling the line between telling your story and offering help and hope to others, which is an amazing thing. And you really don't see that a lot. So you wrote and edited this book during the COVID pandemic. And I'm just curious as to, why was that the perfect timing to you to write the story?
Well, it was very coincidental that I retired at the same time. I retired right before COVID. And when COVID hit, I decided that, gee, this is a perfect time to really put all these little stories and notes that I had made, put them together, both for myself and because I want to help others survive and flourish through this process. I don't think the book would have happened if COVID hadn't hit. So it is a blessing in disguise. And it's interesting that I'm finishing it up just as we're getting maybe more normal after COVID.
Right. So it's like, so you're actually offering additional healing for those people just coming out of this, shutdown and shelter and kind of disruption of our lives, which is really, really smart marketing moves. So you take a really, and I do mean really, for you people who want to read this book, I want to tell you there is a trauma warning in the front of the book for good reason. She doesn't overstep the line, but she does go very close. So you take a deep dive into the emotional and the very physical aspects and the toll that they had on you and other people dealing with childhood trauma. Why was that such an important point to make in the overall message?
Well, I think, again, that is my story. That is what I'm trying to share. If I glossed over it, I don't think the reader would feel it was as honest as it really had to be. I had to be extremely honest with myself first, and then with the reader, because I know other people are going through very similar feelings and concerns. So it was trying to be very honest and tell a true story of what happened.
Right. And honestly, I have to say that you did meet that plateau for your book. It really is very honest. It's heartbreaking at times, but it's also very revealing and cathartic in kind of an unusual way. I've talked to a few of your beta readers, and they were kind of amazed that while they didn't share your similar situation, they did feel connected to you in the way that you presented the information, basically about trauma and how we all deal with trauma. So I think that you've done an amazing job with this. So
thank you so much.
You're very welcome. So we're going to talk a little bit here about why you're here on the Writer's Parachute. And we know that every author and writer has some kind of obstacle or challenge that they experience when they're writing and publishing their book. So I want to know, what was the most surprising one for you?
Well, my background is more in science and math. And I had written a thesis. I'd written more technical kind of writing. And this was a whole new ball game. So I started by writing it as just telling the reader what I did and what I felt. And then I soon learned that they had to be immersed in the scene themselves. I had to write it in scenes, and I had never even thought about that before. But I read some terrific authors, and I worked with you, and I worked with other amazing authors, and I learned so much in the whole process. And so I think that was probably my biggest obstacle. And also just how much work it was to write the book. They line your shelves, but you have no idea what went into making them. So yeah, it was a wonderful process for me.
Right. And yeah, that is a very great point. Is like, each book on your shelf represents hours and sometimes years of work by the author to get it to the point to where it is a beautiful, interesting story. And what you're talking about here about the working in scenes is about showing your audience what you're talking about, rather than just saying this happened to me. You're actually immersing them in the emotions and the feelings and the conversation that you were having with yourself at the time. So yeah, that's a very, very big point, and a lot of new authors are caught off guard by that. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. So you are also an accomplished singer, a wife, a mother, a grandmother. How did those experiences change your perspective about trauma and talking about your past?
I think I have a lot of years to look back on now, raising children, seeing my grandchildren grow up, and experiencing life and perceptions of people. And I think it gave me a wonderful confidence more in talking about things I would never, ever have talked about before, of getting the blame off of me, getting the shame of it. I have much better perspective, so that I'm willing to be really open about it. And that's a huge growth for me.
Right. Well, and I would think that you would also have at least this superficial comparison of your childhood compared to the childhood that you provided for your children, and
Mm-hmm.
for those people around you. And it's like that gives you a very unique perspective, because I think a lot of times when we're talking about these traumas from childhood, people are of the belief that it is perfectly normal. When it's happening to them, they honestly don't feel that it's abnormal. They think this
Absolutely.
is what is happening to everyone around them. And so a lot of times getting that perspective, getting away from that and seeing and opening your eyes to, this is not normal, this is not what everybody goes through.
Right.
It's almost kind of an awakening moment. But and you do talk about that a little bit in the book, so I did want to kind of bring that forward a little bit. So
Absolutely. I think children internalize all of what's happening to them. They take responsibility for so much of it. And I think every year you live as an adult, maybe you're able to let go a little bit more of that as you have more awareness. And I also want to say, I just feel a real responsibility to my grandkids too, and people coming behind me to help them a little bit and find that life they're meant to live.
right. And so we didn't talk about this question, but I'm just going to throw it in there because I think it's something that the audience really needs to understand. And not only were you dealing with these abuse traumas from your childhood, you also were so young that your mind actually kind of encapsulated those moments and kind of hid them from you. So you also were dealing with memory loss, but then you were having breakthrough memories that didn't make sense to you because you did not remember the actual incident. So can you talk a little bit about how you dealt with that? Because to me that was extraordinarily interesting, because it I understand it on an education level, but somewhere in there my mind is just going, wow, it's like amazing what your mind can do to protect you. So can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yes, I had absolutely no memory. I didn't have the slightest bit of it until I was 36, is when I thought I was losing my mind. It was coming back in all kinds of strange things. And and all these traumatic experiences, and I had no connection where it was coming from. So I finally put all the little pieces together and figured out what it was. And then in writing this book, I took the time to do a lot more research on what happened and why this happened to me. And it was fascinating to find out when I was so little, when the sexual abuse started, and it was a primary caregiver. When it's your parent or somebody you're living with, it's extremely traumatic. And those are all kind of the perfect storm, and also with very severe long-term abuse. It's the perfect storm for your mind to put it away. So you have absolutely no idea. I had to live with the person that was assaulting me. So my mind did this amazing thing of keeping it from me. And I do believe I'm here because of that traumatic amnesia. I don't think I would have survived if I had known the whole time what was going on. So.
Right, because the statistics are that a lot of times when children are severely abused at such a young age, that they do become very suicidal and depressed as they get older.
And drugs,
As a
yes,
long term, there's drugs,
overdose,
alcohol. Yeah, there's all of these other coping mechanisms that they have to bring forward. So I agree with you. Having read your story, I would say that it probably did save you. And, it is unfortunate that this doesn't happen for everyone, but I do understand why it happened in your particular case. So I did want to mention that, because that is another just amazing facet that's interesting in your overall story. So I want to talk about that. So we've talked so much about this book, you want to hold it up for another minute and then tell us, when can we expect to get the book?
Well, I believe it'll be out by June of 2022. So I'm very excited about that. And I do plan to have it in all modalities, paperback and ebook and an audiobook. So I hope your listeners are able to find it.
Okay, so you're not going to go with a hardcover, or you're going to wait?
I could do a hardcover. I haven't explored that option.
Okay, all right. Well, awesome. So we're very excited about that. So do mark your calendars for June. Probably towards the end of June, we'll be looking for your book. Of course, you know, when I get that date, I'll certainly be announcing that. So where can we find updates on your actual book release date and any other events that you're going to be having around this book launch?
Well, it will all be on my Facebook page, which is Carol Boyce, author. Mm-hmm. All the updates will be there, and my website, which is carolboyce.com.
Okay.
That's Boyce. Mm-hmm.
Great. And just a reminder to all of those of you listening, we will have links to everything in the show notes, but in case you're listening and you want to write that down now, is Carol, Carol, Boyce, Boyce.com, or you can go to Facebook, and that is facebook.com/Carol Boyce author. So go check her out and be sure to check on those updates. So do you know now which retailers are probably going to be carrying your book?
Well, certainly Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I believe that all the major carriers.
Okay, great. So we'll be looking for that, and we will be updating that. So again, we want to make sure that you fans and readers are able to reach out to you and follow you. So not only do you have Facebook on social media, you also have Instagram and Twitter. So do you know what those handles are for those, so they can go follow you on Instagram and Twitter?
Instagram, I'm at Carol Boyce 1, and Twitter, I'm on at Carol C. Boyce.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and double check that. We'll double check it, but do check the show notes, because I have your Instagram here at Carol C. Boyce.
Okay. We'll
double check that for you.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, do check the show notes.
And that will be updated on my website, carolboyce.com.
Right. And of course, we'll have all the links to all of her social media, her website. And as soon as we get a book link, we'll add that to the show notes. So is there anything else that you would like to include or talk about today before we close out the Writer Parachute and pull a ripcord on our next writing tip?
Well, and I thank you so much, Donna, again. My biggest takeaways are that when you're really suffering with mental illness, with trauma, fears, all of that, there's a reason for it. And you need to go right through the fire looking at it to get to the other side, because the other side is a hopeful, wonderful place where you get your life back. And it's just a roadmap in this book for how to really face it all and get through it. So.
Well, that is an amazing closing here. And you bring up an excellent point, because most of us just don't want to face the
don't want to. I know, are too scared to.
We're too scared too, because a lot of times we feel so alone. And I do appreciate your book in the feeling that I did not at any moment feel like I was alone on that journey. I felt like you were right beside me, guiding me through. And so I can't really talk strongly enough about how well you did in presenting your story in a kind and telling way, because that's a really hard feat to accomplish, is to tell one of these horrifying stories in a way that does connect to your readers but doesn't offend them or make it off-putting to them. So I do congratulate you.
Well, thank you so much, Donna, and I'm really glad you could relate to it. I'm really hoping readers can get help from it.
Right. And that's just it. I do want to remind you, it is a book mostly about her childhood traumas, but I was truly amazed at how much other information about just being a person dealing with life traumas that I got from her story. So even if you were not suffering from these particular things, I think you will find some very important information inside her book that will be very helpful and beneficial to you. So please do go pick up her book when it comes out in June. So thank you again for being here today. So we're going to go ahead and switch gears real quick, and we're going to go to our writing tip. As always, I have a writing tip I pull the ripcord on. Today, we're going to talk about what Carol's problem was and that she brought up, and we're talking about show, don't tell. Now, this is kind of a controversial subject, and I'll explain, because most people are like, no, it's not controversial. You always show, you always don't tell. And this is not necessarily true. There are moments in time when you are working through your book where telling may not be the wrong thing. However, when it is a critical moment, when it is something that you really need to relate to your reader, then yes, showing is important. The difference being, a lot of times a passive voice versus an active voice, it is, instead of telling us that, Carol is angry, Carol, clenches her fist or pounds her fist on the table or stomps away or something like this. This is what we mean by show, don't tell. Don't tell us that Carol's angry, show us how she's angry. So I hope that that is a good tip for you. Do be sure to check that out. But again, there are moments in time in your book where you will be telling. Again, a lot of times that's for expediency's sake. If it's just some information that you need to relate to the reader that is not critical that they understand it fully, or it's just moving the story forward, then again, telling is probably okay. But we do want to look at those incidents through your book and kind of ask yourself the question, is this important? Do they need to know more? Or is it just good enough to just say, we're going to the store? Because again, we don't care which store, we don't care what you bought, just that you went to the store. So, all right. Well, I hope that is helpful for you today. And again, we want to thank Carol Boyce for joining us today on the Writer's Parachute. And
thank you so much, Donna, for having me. It was just a pleasure.
You're very welcome. And as always, we hope all of your writing adventures land perfectly. So until next time, be sure to check our catalog of past episodes, and be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and come back next time for our next interview. So thanks again, Carol. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.